I think what's significant about the Supreme Court taking up this one, though, in particular, it sounds like, should it make it to court, should anything actually happen, should he be prosecuted, it would probably happen after the election. And that's kind of the crucial thing here, that it would seem that there was, the conspiracy theorist in you might want to believe that the Democrats wanted him to get nominated, but also to convict him before we get to the election, creating this horrible mess for the Republican Party. And it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with Managing Editor Chris Irvine.
Hi.
And Chris, Donald Trump is starting to catch what looks like some breaks in his legal saga after really taking it on the chin for the past 6-8 months. What is the significance of the Supreme Court taking up his immunity claim for his campaign, for his political messaging?
I think it's Teflon Don, isn't it? We've talked about it, that nothing ever seems to stick to him. Any sort of controversy that anybody's ever said, oh, well, it looks like Trump might be in trouble now, seems to just constantly get out of it. I think what's significant about the Supreme Court taking up this one, though, in particular, it sounds like, should it make it to court, should anything actually happen, should he be prosecuted, it would probably happen after the election. And that's kind of the crucial thing here, that it would seem that there was, the conspiracy theorist in you might want to believe that the Democrats wanted him to get nominated, but also to convict him before we get to the election, creating this horrible mess for the Republican Party. And it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. So, hypothetically speaking, Trump then wins in 2024, which is a very real possibility. What's to stop him from appointing an attorney general who seeks to dismiss all these charges or simply to pardon himself? I don't know what the rules are necessarily there, but it just leads to that sort of conclusion that Trump is all good,
Right, and what's feeding into that perception is what we're seeing in Georgia with the mess, for lack of a better term, that the district attorney Fani Willis is facing right now. We don't know yet whether she's going to be disqualified, but regardless of what happens, do you think that public perception of that case is damaged beyond repair at this point, or do you think she could kind of salvage the credibility of that case still? I think ultimately that's a bit of a Rorschach test for who you ask. I think again, another kind of Trump tactic over the last few years is usually if there was a news story that was critical of him, but if it was 99% true, but 1% was incorrect, then he would say it was the fake news media, the fake news are out to get me. And I feel like the Willis situation here has that sort of smell about it. She might think that she has a good RICO case here, although there was arguments at the time that it was kind of overbearing. But even if the determination is that she's done nothing wrong here, or maybe it was inappropriate but not enough to disqualify her, it looks terrible. It has a stink of corruption about it, and it seems like it would just undermine the whole thing. So even if, for example, Trump does get convicted, it would just be, well, it was a witch hunt out to get him, and this kind of underhand behavior explains it. It's not a good look whatsoever. It remains to be seen, though, what the conclusion is there. And I can't really call it, to be honest. I don't know what your thoughts are there. I think a lot of legal analysts genuinely don't know, because there is potentially some grounds for disqualification, but it's such an unprecedented situation.
Yeah.
And all of this is happening against the backdrop of Super Tuesday coming up.
Yeah.
What are we expecting to see that day?
Well, I think the campaign has almost got a little bit dull in some respects, because Trump has won every state. Biden has won, obviously, every state. Now, Michigan was somewhat interesting because they had the uncommitted voters who were protesting, in particular, the situation in Gaza. And people are kind of looking to see if Nikki Haley can get to that 40%, even though she doesn't really ever seem to get to 40%. But I think there's some interesting down ballot races to look at. I've spent a lot of time kind of focusing on California the last few days. We've got this jungle primary on the seat for
former Senator Dianne Feinstein. That looks like it's going to end up being Adam Schiff that will ultimately win that. But that'll be quite a kind of nasty race there, depending on what the runoff is. It could probably be Schiff versus Katie Porter. There's plenty of interesting House races there, and California last time it helped kind of almost sway the House for the Republicans. So plenty of interest there. I think as we get closer and closer to November and people get sick of Trump and Biden, quite frankly, it will be time to start looking at these other races and interesting propositions that are out there, because okay, the big shiny object is the presidential election, but there's an awful lot to play for otherwise. And I think Super Tuesday will be an interesting start to that.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more reporting from Chris and the rest of the political team at WashingtonExaminer.com.